No.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the ninth bulletin follow-up. I'm going to share my screen, and we can see that it's the June 2025 issue of the British Sundial Society Bulletin that we're going to be looking through. And here is the front cover, which we may look at again shortly. It's one of my favourite modern sundials, made by, or designed and largely made by the late Alan Mills of Leicester, and it is now fairly safely shown on display in a Leicester park. On the right, as normal, you have my email address for comments and suggestions, and at the top, I put in what you can search for, British Sundial Society YouTube, if you want to look at previous editions of these follow-ups. And then if you want to do it more quickly or more directly, you just key in youtube.com/at the BSS. As usual, I show you somewhat skeletal contents of this issue of a bulletin, starting with the editorial. And the lead article is given by three authors, including Jonathan Peacock, and he is going to be talking to us later at the postscript. All the other articles we'll skim through. We probably won't say much about the reports and accounts at the end. They are very tedious. But let me highlight the Dixon Dial, Bowes Museum, which is going to be the subject of a postscript rather later. Now, that's all I have to say. And at this juncture, I unshare my screen, and I'm hoping that Chris Lusby-Taylor has shown up. Has he shown up?
He has. Oh,
Right. Over to you, Chris.
thank you. I'd like to say a few words about the Newbury meeting, which is on Saturday, the 27th of September. I've taken this over from David Pawley, who's been running it for many years, but he's rather run out of energy and time, I think, this year. I'm not entirely sure exactly the process for organising the program, but I'm sure I'll manage. But at the moment, I'm rather short of talks, so what I'd really like to do is to encourage anybody who's within a reasonable distance of Newbury in Berkshire to come along to this one-day event. It's, if you like, it's a little bit like a scale down and a much less formal conference than the one we had recently in Winchester, for example. So it's a one-day event. Historically, we've placed about a 10-minute limit or a 10-minute goal on the average length of talks. So talks can be given by people who are very new to sundials, just want to say something about their interest in sundials or ask a question or whatever. But please, if you can get in touch with me by emailing me at newbury@sundialsoc.org.uk, which is on the flyer that came out with the bulletin that we're talking about. I would really like to know as soon as possible who can give talks, and I can help with things like putting them into PowerPoint probably. The flyer in the bulletin says that when you email newbury@sundialsoc.org.uk, please provide a talk title and attach your PowerPoint file. Well, really, it's a couple of months away before the conference. I'm not expecting you to attach your PowerPoint at this time. Maybe just to indicate that you will be using PowerPoint or something similar on the day. That'll be absolutely fine. The other thing is, historically, we've always welcomed people to bring along sundials, pictures, anything to do with sundials to show to other people, because there's such huge variety in this world of sundials that there's always something that you've never seen before. But the last year or two, there haven't been quite so many shown. So please, anybody who's planning to come to the meeting, feel more than free, feel, you almost embarrassed if you don't bring along something to show off that will represent your interest in sundials. The last thing I want to say is that the meeting is some way out of Newbury. It's about 5-10 minute drive from Newbury station, and I've always been very willing to give people a lift to and from Newbury station before and after the meeting. And I'm hoping that some other people who are going to be driving there will do the same thing. But first of all, I'd like to say to anybody who's planning to come by train, please let me know, and I will try to organise either myself or somebody else to give you a lift to and from the station. And that's about it, I think. Thanks, Frank.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. You are, of course, all welcome. You don't have to be a member of a society to come. Just turn up at Newbury at 10 o'clock on Saturday, the 27th of September? And it's conveniently situated. It's just 1 hour by train from London, and many people come. Indeed, Martins is coming from Latvia, which is about 1,200 miles away, and finds it very convenient too. So the rest of you can always come, and we look forward to hearing you give a talk if that's what you wish to do.
Exactly. So Martins and Frank and anybody else who I'm pretty sure will be coming by train, just let me know, and I'll organise transport from the station.
Okay.
Splendid. Well, let's now go on to Martins, who's going to show us the front cover of the bulletin again. Now, stay with that, Martins, just for a moment. Can you zoom in on this so we can see the hour numbers nice and clearly? Right. Now, this is obviously copied from the idea from ancient Greco-Roman hemicyclium, and it's actually slightly more challenging to make in British latitudes than it ever was in Greece, because the angle between the horizontal surface, the horizon surface, if you like, and the sloping, forward sloping surface totally in shadow underneath matches for co-latitude. I'm afraid I've forgotten what the latitude of Leicester is, but I guess it's about 53 degrees, if not more. So that makes that angle about 37 degrees, and it's starting to get fragile. You clearly couldn't have this design in North Sweden, or certainly couldn't have it at the North Pole, because that angle would then be zero. As it is, you've got some very sharp corners at the inner ends of the horseshoe shape of the horizon line, and they're remarkably fragile. I'm astonished that this sundial, which must now be 30 years old, is still in such good condition. When Alan Mills designed this, he, of course, used antique hour lines, unequal hour lines. So he's got 12 hour lines, which are all nodus driven, and they are equally spaced for each day of the year. And he has very correctly, in my view, labelled the spaces between the hour lines. So he's numbering the hours rather than the hour lines themselves, and he's numbering them in Roman numerals. I would prefer to use Greek, but that's just purely personal fetish. Quite enough of that. You now move on to the next inside front cover. And on the left, this is what I talked about at Newbury. And here I should say I'm extraordinarily grateful to Michael Romek for decoding some of the German on this sundial, which is in Schwabacher Schrift. I'm very happy to read modern German. Old German I find quite challenging. As a matter of fact, I find it no easier to read the same kind of lettering in English. Any of you who have seen the original King James Bible from 1611, that was written in this so-called black letter typeface. Very hard work decoding it. I'm not going to say much about this, but maybe we'll say a little bit more when we come to the write-up in the of the conference. What I will say, though, is that literally in the past 24 hours, I've been in discussion with Maciek Lowe's. Is he with us, Martins? No, who has been extraordinarily helpful about decoding some aspects of Zachariah Bourne, the guy who designed this. It seems now that he designed this particular layout that we see here when he was just 19 years old. It was almost a test piece for himself, and this got hidden away for many years until it was rediscovered better part of 100 years later, 80 years later, in 1633, when it was published in book form by a later generation. Enough of that. Let's move on to the first article. We're not going to say much about this at this stage because this is the subject of the postscript that Jonathan Peacock, who we know is with us, we've said hello already. He's going to be telling us more about the Dixon family. They are a remarkable family of engineers, scientists, and otherwise technologically minded people, venturing into coal mining, steel making, shipbuilding, and particularly surveying. And indeed, it was Jeremiah Dixon who, with Charles Mason, surveyed the Mason-Dixon line. This is a sundial made by that family. Now, does Sue want to say anything about this that isn't already clear? I won't ask Jonathan to say anything because he's going to be saying it all at the end.
Sue, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I haven't got anything to say particularly, unless anyone has any specific questions they'd like to ask.
You might tell us what part you played in the as it were, understanding the sundial when it first came to you. What did you think? That sort of thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, thought it was a lovely sundial. Quite straightforward. It was quite difficult to decipher. I think Mache had managed to decipher most of it, and then I had some input, and we went back and forth, and he'd made some mistakes, and then I'd made some mistakes. But at the end of it, we got there between us, working out just what was what. And of course, Jonathan contributed largely with the information about the Dixon family, which we're going to hear about later.
Yes, well, I think that's probably enough for a moment because, as I said, we'll certainly come back to this for the postscript, and there'll be far more to say. But do go on to the next page, Martins. There is a picture of Jonathan, who you're going to see for real shortly. And below that, you might just zoom in on this for a moment. This is the first proper photograph taken of this sundial. This was installed earlier in the year. It's now the fifth sundial I have made or designed for a Cambridge college. This is a new one for King's College. So this is the rival to the King's College Chapel. It's now got a proper sundial, much more elegant in some ways than the others. As you can tell very clearly, it's almost direct east facing, so it sees the sun only in the morning. Actually, it's a memorial sundial, the whole court. It's an absolutely amazing building complex. Tens of millions of pounds spent altogether. Sundial, not quite as much as that, but it's very difficult to make a direct east or west facing sundial look at all interesting. You could end up with just ruled lines looking like an exercise book. So I've had this entirely nodus driven. It was taken, this photograph was taken at 6:15, 6:15 in the morning, local apparent time. And you can see the splodgy thing. Can you go very closely in on the shadow? Yeah, that's right. Go, there you are. Now you can see that it really does pretty close to 6:15. Now I did take the photograph at 6. Frankly, they put it in a completely useless place. Got this huge complex of buildings, any amount of acreage of walls to put a sundial on, but this was the position they insisted on. And not only is it only a morning sundial, but until about 6 o'clock in the morning, even at the solstice, the shadow of other buildings is in the way. I did take a photograph at 6 o'clock in the morning, but Christine, who typesets these articles, said it was unacceptable because there was a huge shadow over the rest of the dial. It did show this nice splodge. So fortunately, I waited another quarter of an hour to get it at that time. I have since then got one at 10 o'clock local apparent time on the day of the solstice. The guy who, in whose memory, what happened was this wealthy donor built the whole court in memory of his brother Stephen Taylor, and Stephen Taylor Memorial Court it's called. We talk about courts in Cambridge, seemingly quadrangles or quads in Oxford. And the quotation is from Tennyson, and this man was very keen on sunflowers. So you see, you pull out again now, Martins. You can see lots of sunflowers. So that's for history. This is my sundial number 5, and I'm hoping to flood a few more before I finally expire. Okay, on to the next article. And this is a Jackie Jones article about sealing dials. Now, we have experts on sealing dials with us, in particular Woody. And indeed, Jackie refuses positive point blank to use Zoom. The article is pretty self-explanatory, and you can see she's decorated her ceiling. But what we're seeing there on the right was her previous incarnation. There's a very famous computer scientist called Fred Brooks, whom I studied much when my teaching days, and he had this famous saying, whatever you design, throw the first design away. The second will always be better. Now, he was talking about computers, but Jackie seemingly has done that with this ceiling. So top right, you can see how it was. She threw that design away and came up with this new design, which we can see described in this article. She's just got hour lines and a few constant declination lines, nothing like as elaborate as Woody's, but she doesn't have to go out into her yard to see it, go into her man lodge. She can see this in the comfort of her bed, I think. Well, enough of that. On to the postcard potpourri. This typical, I don't think it still exists, I can't remember now, but there you can see the sundial clearly and the remnants of a castle in a bit of garden at Lewes in Sussex, I think it is. Right, next one. Right, we have a memorial to Jane Walker, who was a founder member of the British Sundial Society, and she wrote the book. You can see the covers of this. It ran to 2 or 3 editions. There was a very lucky coincidence, but pretty much as soon as the British Sundial Society had been founded, in 1989, there was a government edict insisting that all primary schools should know about the sun, the moon, and the planets, and about sundials. And so she filled an educational need pretty quickly with this little book, which sold lots and lots, probably the best-selling British Sundial Society publication ever. Sadly, schools are no longer required to know anything at all, at least in primary school, except about whatever these modern technical terms are about health and hygiene and being good people. So enough of that. The Wimborne Minster dial by Martin Jenkins. This was an interesting problem. Is Martin signed in?
Checking right now.
I don't think he is. If you read the article, you'll know what it's all about. Essentially, there's a description of a sundial which doesn't quite fit what is actually there, and he spends the image doesn't match the description, and he spends 2 pages discussing this. So let's move on through that. The Slivy Toves. This is Jackie Jones reread her Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and came across the famous Tenniel drawing of the sundial, and Slivy toves build their nests under sundials. Now, I pointed out to Jackie when she wrote this article that for many years, almost in decades, the North American Sundial Society Compendium has the Tove's Nest as a sort of little collection of items towards the end of each issue. And so she really ought to get an acknowledgement or note, bring Fred into the picture, our patron. So underneath this, you will see, just below that, there's a comment by Fred Sawyer. I can't remember where it is. Yes, our overseas patron writes, early in the history of NAS, a Tove took up residence beneath a sundial near the editor's desk. In exchange for an occasional bit of cheese, the Tove maintains a regular column, the Tove's Nest, of small news items in our quarterly journal, the Compendium. Now, this is the sort of thing that enthusiastic academics have arguments about. I said to Fred, surely it ought to be Tove's S apostrophe, not apostrophe S. And he said, well, there isn't room for two toves under a sundial. And I said, well, how can they nest? And it's not you have to have two toves to create baby toves. So I feel there's no point in having a nest unless you can get two of them in. And anyway, he explained that this was a point was argued about many years ago, and they came to the conclusion that they would stick to tove with an apostrophe s. But that's a sort of pedantic point that people can argue about. But it's a nice little article and reminds us of Tenniel's splendid drawing of a sundial. And clearly in the days when they had a sundial with triangular gnomons on a little pedestal, very common in Victorian gardens. Still quite common today, of course. Is John Davis with us? Because he can tell us more about this than I usefully can. You will remember the last bulletin follow-up, we discussed this double horizontal sundial, which John Davis and others strongly believe to be attributed to Elias Allen. And one telling point would have been a metallurgical analysis. Since John didn't actually set eyes on this sundial, he couldn't do this metallurgical analysis himself, but the owner of this sundial was so enthusiastic to have this done that almost within a matter of days, he'd got a metallurgical analysis which demonstrates that this sundial is made from a copper alloy, which Elias Allen, the maker of the sundial, very much kept to himself. He wouldn't even let his apprentices use this particular sort of copper alloy. He liked it so much that the limited supplies he had, he reserved for himself. And it turns out the metallurgy is exactly right for that. So this is pretty much nails it, that this really is an Elias Allen double horizontal sundial. I don't hear John speaking up and saying I've got it all wrong. So let's move on to the next one. Well, we had the follow-up of last time's article, which discussed yet another ceiling sundial, which Andrew Hodson had designed and made for his previous house. He now lives in Cambridge, I'm delighted to say. But that story was written up to some extent on the right hand of these two pages. So on to the next one, which is Leicester dials. Now, this is a long article. It's very interesting. It's written by three Spanish authors, I think, one of whom has spent some time living in Leicester. And they just noticed all these sundials around Leicester without ever really knowing about the late Alan Mills, whom, of course, those of us of a certain age well remember from many sundial conferences. And he was a lecturer at the University of Leicester. And in his spare time, he designed numerous sundials for Leicester, and many, but not all, sundials in this article are sundials due to him. And I have it in mind that in next year or year after or something, we might even go to Leicester for a conference. There's plenty of sundials to see within walking distance of one another in Leicester, if there is a suitable venue for a hotel. Well, without the Spaniards to offer any information, if anybody raising a hand at any stage, Martins, can you see?
So no raised hands. There's some chat message. I should check.
Could I say?
Yes, sure.
I agree that there are two toves, because he says twilling, 'twas brilling and the slivy toves. He doesn't.
Yeah, he does indeed. Yes.
Tove, yeah. And my last house was I called it Borough House.
Yeah, right. Well, very good place to call it.
Postman confused.
Well, perhaps you should put a Tenniel drawing on your gatepost or something. That would have solved the problem, or maybe confused it even more. Yes, I thought this was an absolutely splendid argument. I could just see you need a special subcommittee which convenes several times a week for a year to decide on that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The only one thing worse in Cambridge colleges is the wine committees of their colleges. They go on for years discussing trivia.
Near Leicester, there's a house I know called Nanpanton House in Nanpanton, which is in Loughborough, which is not, I don't know how far you need to be, but we could rent that.
Yes.
I know friends who own it, and they rent it out for conferences and things like that. And it's beautiful.
That's very good. But you don't happen to know anybody who lives near or have a suitable conference venue in Grantham or Newark-on-Trent. We have these people who live in Scotland who say they would like conferences to be on the East Coast Main Line, please. And so they came to Peterborough and other conferences which have been nearby, but like Nottingham, but they won't go any further south. But Leicester would be perfectly fine. I think
I'll
we go.
send you details.
Yeah, yes. Back to Leicester, please, Martins.
Chris has a comment here
Oh,
about
yes.
this image that it seems that the sun is shining from due north, actually.
It does, doesn't it? Ah,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, we should look on shadows.
No, I think the sun is right, and it's clear that, as with any garden centre sundial, it's been put up the wrong way around.
Sundial is wrong.
Yeah, I've seen many sundials set up like that.
Nice observation.
And I would expect that John Tenniel had gone into a real garden and seen it just like that. So let's leave it as it is. Right, back to Leicester. And I think we leave that one at that. And we have next, we have the, yes, is Anthony Turner with us?
I should look. There is Anthony in our call.
I don't think it's the right one. So anybody answering to the name of Anthony is welcome to make comments about this. Compass dials, of course, abound. There was a nice baby compass dial found on the wreck of the Mary Rose, which you can go and buy in Portsmouth, replicas of it or copies of it. I have one of those. I think it cost me 3 shillings. It was so that they're quite simple to make, reasonably accurate over a small range of latitudes. You have to worry about the magnetic declination, but apart from that, you can do rather well. So over to the next one. Now I'm hoping Sue can say something about this, even though there isn't much to say about it. We can add her picture. Sue, come on, come and say something.
Jeffrey wants to make some comments.
So Jeff.
Yeah, this dial is only about 5 miles down the road.
About this one.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's only about 5 miles down the road from us. So I decided on the summer solstice to go and explore it.
Yes.
Because Sue had pointed out the fact that it had been poorly executed, because they'd only included the winter dial and not the summer dial, and so the diameter is rather large for the date scale. So in fact, I have a picture showing my shadow at solar noon on the day after the summer solstice this year. Can I share my screen?
Yes, you can.
How do I do that?
Click the yellow thing at the bottom, the green button at the bottom.
Stop sharing from my side, and there's this green rectangle on the bottom side with arrow showing up.
Yep. Okay, I found it.
Press that green thing.
Okay. This is my shadow doing as I'm instructed by the information board, and standing on the appropriate date with my arm outstretched. I could only do one because I was using my phone camera with the other. And I'm nearly 6 foot tall, and as you see, my shadow does not reach the 12 o'clock hour marker.
But summer solstice is possibly not the best time for long shadows.
Absolutely not. But then there should have been another
ring.
12 o'clock marker
closer.
here, according to the original design of the dial.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it would then have worked properly. And of course, if you're a child doing this,
Yeah.
it would be quite seriously impaired by the fact that your shadow doesn't reach the marker, particularly as the background is asphalt, dark asphalt, and the shadow doesn't show very well on it. But I thought I'd just make the point that Sue's already made, that this dial is a shadow of what it should have been, because they don't have the summer dial on. Of course, it does show Greenwich Mean Time all the time, which in some ways is a benefit, and it does properly explain on the notice board that you have to add 1 hour during summertime. But it was a shame that the inner ellipse isn't included, and so the shadows are too short.
You have to come back in
Well,
winter.
not only that, the date scale is wrong, because the northern half of the date scale is too short. So you should actually be standing further north, you know, and you shadow, but yeah, so there's two things wrong. You're missing the inner summer ellipse, but also the date scale isn't correct. And in fact, there's a third error. You may see on that picture of yours, Jeffrey, you can see some sort of, they're actually chalk marks and going along underneath the 12 marker.
Yes.
Those chalk marks, the slab should actually be positioned centrally over that chalk mark, because the point at which your shadow is supposed to hit the you know, so sorry, I'm not explaining this very well. The measurement from the date scale to the ellipse is actually at the bottom of the 12 marker, not the center of the marker. Are you with me? So the markers are actually a little bit further outside the ellipse than they ought to be. So there are quite a lot of problems with this dial, and it was really disappointing that they hadn't done it as well. They told me what they wanted, I gave them what they asked for, and then they've gone and done something different. And it's in the middle of an orchard. That's nice. Although the trees are fairly small at the moment, and they have assured me they will cut them and keep them trimmed so that it will always get daylight, but I have yet to see that.
I can show you those additional images you said.
Yes, please,
Okay,
Martins, if you would show the first one.
Share the screen. So here I'm showing I zoomed into image from article where we can see those chalk marks, and then I could,
you want to see the
and then I could show this additional image.
Can I show you the additional image I gave you? That's it. Yes. This is the bit I like best about the dial.
Yes, I agree.
It's made of dendritic sandstone, and what happens is the water and minerals leach into the layers of sandstone, and as they trickle along, they form these little tree shapes or fern shapes, and I thought they were like fossil imprints. But the stonemason who was there, the guy who actually carved this, said, no, it's dendritic sandstone, and that's made, those little patterns are made by water leaching in, and then the sandstone has been cut along the layer where the water's gone in. And so quite a few of the stones have these patterns around the outside, which I thought was the most interesting part of the dial in the end. Can you also show, Martin, the aerial views? Have you got those? That Frank, this was what Frank asked for. He wanted to have a look at the aerial view, which you can see quite clearly. But Frank was wondering if they'd actually made it so that it pointed to true north. So if you can show the second one, Martins. Yeah, that's on Google Earth. Which you can see from the line I've drawn there, which is just about right. It's got a heading of 359.78 degrees, which I thought was near enough. So yeah, it's pointing true north.
That's the one thing they've set out correctly. They have got the orientation pretty spot on.
Yeah. Yeah, although to be fair, at that date, there wasn't a huge difference between magnetic north and true north at that location.
No.
But anyway, that bit looks correct. Any questions?
It is all too common for analytic sundials, which people think are nice and easy, to get them wildly wrong. I've had problems with the ones I've done, even with professional surveyors who very thoroughly understand the difference between true north and magnetic north, just goofing it. And so it sets, despite even actually going there and holding their hands where it really ought to be, and they saying yes, 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 come back a month later and they got it wrong. I've had that even in places like outside a suburban station in Naples. Well, I've got a sundial there where they just got it wrong by about 5 degrees, which is very irritating. And there's a double ring sundial in Cambridge, which they've set up twice. Each time they've got it wrong. Each time I've reported it. Oh, well, we'll try and get it right next time. Should anybody who's in this, any participant, be interested in helping a local authority setting out a sundial, there is one by St Mary's Paddington Church on the Regent Canal. It's really quite an attractive spot within 10 minutes walk of Paddington Station. If you climb up the back of Paddington Station to the canal and then head west, just off the towpath of the canal, they've got a site for an animatic sundial. Because they're relaying the paths, they've removed all the bits, all the central stone and the date line and the 13 stones which were marked out, I think, correctly. They've all gone. They're redoing the paths. Now they want to put it back, and they need somebody to help with the layout. And I'd very much prefer somebody else to do it than do it myself. So if you're interested, please let me know. If you live vaguely near London, it's literally within walking distance of Paddington Station. And see if we can get that one right.
Hello.
Hello.
May I come in?
Yes, yes.
I can't see a hand thing at the bottom of my screen. But anyway,
Called gestures.
No, I just wanted to mention that our local nature garden has a circular bench, and I was asked if I would do a sundial. So all we did was to have a spot to stand in the middle, and I put numbers on the wooden struts of the bench from about 9 until about 3 p.m. where the sun is. And it's the children from the school love it, apparently, and they always want to come and see the sundial, and it's explained to them how it works. And it's again, I didn't bother to have winter and summer hours. I just put them in for the natural ones. And this is all, it's of interest to children.
Oh yes, they're very good for that. Woody?
Yes, hi. I wanted to expand on your rant, if I may, and rant a bit more. There's a third type of north, and I'm forgetting the proper name for it, at least in the States, but it's to do with the way the lines of longitude are laid out, and the way that the reference point that surveyors often use. And that can vary by several degrees from either magnetic north or true north. So you really do have to be very careful when working with people like this if it matters.
Yes.
Yes, you're talking about grid
right.
north.
That's called grid north in English.
Yes, grid north. Yes, thank you.
In this is my Italian, when I was having discussions in Italian with this Italian surveyor, first part of the discussion was to establish the vocabulary, and he knew about Nord Magnetico and he knew about Nord Geographico. It took a little while before we sorted out what the other one is, and the Italian is beautiful, Nord Reticulato. And I thought that's a lovely word, reticulated north, which is exactly what it is. You get all these little squares. So he understood that. So I said, well, I don't want Nord Reticulato, I don't want Nord Magnetico, I want Nord Geographico. All that was written
How about North Greedo?
Greedle?
Greedo instead of Guido.
Oh, yes. Oh, fortunately, we didn't have that to contend with. Yes, you're quite right. Getting things right is difficult. Maybe we move on from this one, Martins. We've had enough fun at their expense.
I'm amused that the drawing, the Frogmore Community Campus Orchard drawing, has got very long shadow on the diagram on it.
Yes, it has, hasn't it?
You mean here?
Oh yes,
Yes.
on the billboard. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it could be like that in winter. We don't know what the time of year it was.
Actually, the person is standing here around equinox
Yes,
time.
yes, he is. Well, there's at 9 o'clock on an equinox. That's not too far wrong, I think.
No.
That's just plausible. After the equinox, well, as you move into summer, it all goes wrong. So it does work in the winter half of the year. So, Jeff, you must go back at the winter half of the year and see whether it's even plausibly right.
And bring your butterfly.
Yes, yes, yes. Right. Enough of that. This is the discussion about the conference which we held in Winchester, and some really nice places we went to in this city, at one stage the capital of England, would you believe, and where it was presided over by King Alfred, who in essence invented the English language. It's not too strong a saying to make that assertion. Of course, he invented Old English rather than the English we speak today, but up till his time there were warring tribes all over the place, and he produced some sort of coherence, and there were a great number of candidate languages to speak. And he said, it shall be this, and so it was. And it's now spread across the world. If you go to the, if you look bottom of the right-hand page there, we just have a quick look at this sundial I talked about. This is the inside of the front cover. On the left, you can see how it is in the actual old woodcut. So dial 4 as on the woodcut. It's not entirely, there are no numbers for these hour lines, but there are 12 spaces. So it depends how you look at it, 13 or 11 lines. Between the two horizon ends, there are 11 lines, and so there are 12 spaces. And if you look at the top left, on the left-hand dial 4, you'll see the first hour is the sign for Saturn. Yes, that's right. Saturn, it then goes Saturn, Sun, Moon. That's not hour order, that's day order. Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So he's got that wrong, but it is at least going round anti-clockwise, except that's not right. This is an equatorial dial if you look carefully at where we are in the diagram as a whole. And so the shadow actually goes around. This is the northern side of an equatorial dial. Shadow goes around anti-clockwise. So on the right, you see my version of this, which is adjusted somewhat. And there on Saturday on the extreme right, you see that the planets are in the order Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Moon, which is the order they should be. And they go round clockwise, which is quite right and proper. Moreover, he's put the subnodus point on the horizon line on the left, and the subnodus point, this is not a vertical dial, so the subnodus point should not be on the horizon line. He should be at the center of his system of circles. And the innermost circle, you can do the calculations. You don't need to know the height of the nodus, but you can work out from the geometry of the dial itself what the diameter of the circle is for the summer solstice, and the innermost circle is for the summer solstice. And of course, we work outwards. We can never quite reach the equinox because the circle extends to infinity and it won't show the winter half of the year. There are so many mistakes in the left-hand diagram, just setting out mistakes. If you look at the very top left-hand corner where he's got the name of the day of the week, it says Sonnabend, except it only gets as far as Sonnab, and he hasn't got enough space to put in the END. He's just got a sort of abbreviation. It's just ill thought out and poorly executed. Turns out that he did this at the age of 19. This is Zachariah born. And then he went on to produce an absolutely astonishing star atlas, which is really beautiful and elegant. So he did improve with age, and he did have the decency to keep this under wraps, and it wasn't really discovered until long after he died. You can read a little bit about it in the bulletin. I'll say no more about that now. I think that's the next thing is the accounts, is it, Martins? Let's have a look.
Yeah.
Yes, well, we're not going to go through those. So now I did promise Chris that just before we embarked on the, Chris Lusby Taylor that is, that just before we embarked on the postscript, he could have another harangue, a shorter one, I hope, about the Newbury meeting. So would you like to say that again, Chris?
Yeah, so for any latecomers or anybody who didn't hear what I said right at the beginning, I've taken over the responsibility for running the lovely little meeting that we have been holding every year at Newbury, a one-day meeting on a Saturday in September. And the date this year is September the
27th, I think.
27th, thank you. And my concern just at the moment is that although with the flyer that went with the June bulletin, there was an invitation to people to let us know what talks they would like to give. We definitely don't have enough at the moment. And so I'd really like to encourage anybody who is planning to come to let me know if they could just talk for maybe just 5 or 10 minutes on some aspect of Sundials that appeals to them or that they have got questions about. I want it to be a really informal meeting. It's not going to have the same sort of structure, if you will, as the main two-day conference. It's just a one-day affair that we invite non-members to come along. We often have quite local people who are interested in various aspects of the history of Newbury and so on. So please, if you are anywhere within the vicinity of Berkshire, do come along on Saturday, the 27th of September. The flyer in with the bulletin gives you all the information you basically need. I would just add one thing which I mentioned before, which is it says please attach your PowerPoint file if you're going to be volunteering to give a talk. So what I'm saying is no, I don't need that until much closer to the date. Just please let me know what sort of subject you'd like to talk about, and just so that I can sort of get a feel for how to plan the day. That's about it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. And just one addition to that, it costs only £10 for the whole day's enjoyment. So really good bargain price. Okay, over to you, Jonathan.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Frank was kindly saying that I was going to talk about the article and the sundial, but in the presence of such expert knowledge, I'm not going to go near the sundial topic because you all know far more than me. But I would like, if I may, to entertain you with a short description of some members of the Dixon family. Many of you will know of families where the genetic makeup carried through from 2 to 3 or even 4 generations. But the Dixons have been an amazing family who have been scientists and surveyors and, as Frank said, artists through more than 6 generations. And so I thought that I would set the background to the sundial in this amazing family. The story starts here in County Durham, and this is an image of Raby Castle, which is privately owned, lived in by one family. It's a genuine medieval castle, and this is where the Dixons began their careers as servants working for the Lords Barnard. And the castle is owned by Lord Barnard. Today it's the 17th Lord Barnard, and he lives there and owns it. And the Dixons began in Raby Village, which was just the far side of Raby Castle, as you see it here, although they later moved to the village of Copfield. Now, I hope you've all received a copy of the family tree, which I had created. It's only a fragment of the family tree, But when I tell you there were 25 George Dixons on the full family tree, you will understand why I'm trying to help you all to keep track of who I'm talking about with this fragment of the tree that covers the scientists that we're going to talk about today. The first one of note was George II, who was the one who was born in 1671. And here's an image of him. And he was the steward at Raby Castle. So he worked for Lord Barnard, and he was a Quaker, which was significant in the relationship between them. Even in 1700, the Lords Barnard were very religiously tolerant and accepted this. And there are many stories about George Dixon as the servant who would address his lord as thee and thou, which was highly improper in those days, but it's what he, as a Quaker, wanted to do. But he's the first of whom we have an image, and he was the first of whom we have scientific note in that he was a surveyor. So he was not only a house servant in Raby Castle, but he also was a surveyor of the estates. And here's in the 1720s a map which he created of the Raby estates. You can see it's called a plan of the Raby domains and castle. And in fact, the castle is over to the right-hand side. You can see my cursor indicating it. And that is where the castle was. He lived in the village just to the north of it. And this is the part of the park which was used for farming in those days, although it was to become a deer park. And another map that he drew, which was the map of the actual village itself. And you can see these details of who lived in the holdings and what the acreage was and things like this. So this was George Dixon, and he had a younger brother, Ralph Dixon, who's of great interest to us because he created or had created for him, I can't say he was the craftsman, the sundial that is the subject of the article. He moved away. He was born in Raby, Ralph was, but being the younger brother, younger to George, the steward, he moved off and became a farmer in a suburb of Bishop Auckland called Hennell, in Southchurch. And he was a farmer, a tenant farmer, and that's where the sundial first went. And this is discussed in the article that you'll have all read. There is the sundial. The man beside it, because this is a photograph obviously from 1920, is Wayneman Dixon. We'll talk about him later. But there is the sundial in the garden at Garden House, which is where it was later to move from Hennell. But that is the sundial that Ralph Dixon had made. We then move, and here are the images of the sundial, which again have been reproduced in the articles, so you're quite familiar with all of this. And at the bottom you see the date, the 1716, and the D and the R and S for Ralph and Susanna Dixon. We now moved on to George Dixon, who is the grandson of Ralph. So this is now George IV. George III, his father, had been a surveyor, but we have no maps retained. We merely know that. But much more to the point, his father, George, was a miner. He mined both coal and lead in the Raby estates, which were vast. It was 100,000 acres of land. And he created the first wealth for the family. And so when he died, this George that we're now looking at, George the fourth in the family tree, born in 1732, he inherited Garden House in Cockfield, which had been built by his father, and he inherited the coal mines. And here is the first real flourishing, because this man was a truly great scientist. He was an artist, and I'll show you a picture that he drew later, but he was a coal miner, And much more to the point, he was what they called in those days a coal viewer. Now, these were very educated men, and they had to be chemists and hydrologists and miners and estimators and engineers. They had to cover the full range of everything that might be found underground. And George wrote articles and drew maps studying the geology of Cotfield Fell. He created coke ovens, which were novel at that time. So he was making coke, and he realized that the tar could be got out from the coal as it was turned to coke, and he was exporting tar to go onto the bottoms of ships because we had not yet got the copper bottoming that was to follow. He was the first person on record to have made coal gas. So when you heat coal in an enclosed space, it gives off coal gas, which is a mixture of methane and similar hydrocarbons. And he did experiments in 1750, which were described by his nephew, John Bailey. And in this, he had a blowback and an explosion. So he stopped work on it. And coal gas wasn't rediscovered for another 30 years by, in fact, a man in Glasgow. So he is absolutely on record as the first discoverer of coal gas, although he didn't get to use it. And he was a fine artist. So he really was an extremely broad-ranging and accomplished scientist. He drew maps, he surveyed. So here is just the cartouche of a map. The map that this is the cartouche to is 7 feet long and 4 feet wide, which is why I can't get a meaningful illustration of it that you would be able to read. It's a vast sheet. But you can see that it was surveyed 4 lines up from the bottom, Mr. George Dixon, and the date 1769. And this is a survey of the Raby Estates with respect to the lead mines there. And here's an illustration that he drew in 1770. When he was a young man, he went down to London and was employed as a decorator of Chelsea pottery. So he was a man of the widest of talents, and a great scientist as well. Meanwhile, his younger brother, Jeremiah, who's going to go over to America, was making maps of the Raby Estates. And he was principally a surveyor. That was his main task. He helped his brother with the surveying. They surveyed canals. They did all sorts of things. And this is an example of the maps that Jeremiah was making. And he worked for all his life as a servant at Raby, except when he was going off on major projects. The first of these was to observe the transit of Venus in 1761. And at that time, we're in the Age of Enlightenment, and when science is beginning its exploration of the universe, and the great question was how far away the sun was, the distance to the sun, because that would allow them to start to measure the size of the universe. And it had been predicted, in fact, by Hawley, the previous astronomer royal, who was by now dead, but he had predicted that in 1761 and in 1769, there would be a transit of Venus. These transits happen in couplets, 8 years apart, every 105 years approximately. And Hawley had predicted that there would be one in 1761. So the Royal Society had got together teams to go and observe the transit of Venus. And the whole point was to make use of parallax. So they wanted as wide a baseline as possible around the world. And so they were starting in Greenwich, where the Royal Observatory was, but they wanted scientists to go to distant parts of the world so that they had the baseline width across the world to measure the parallax of the transit as it crossed the surface of the sun, as the planet crossed the surface of the sun. And so in 1761, the Royal Society was sending Mason and Dixon, and this was the first time they worked together, out to Sumatra in the East Indies. But they didn't get to sail because of the weather until January 1761 on a Navy ship, HMS Seahorse, frigate, and HMS Seahorse got into the channel and almost immediately bumped into a French frigate, a larger frigate ship called the Legrand, and a tremendous sea battle. I mean, we were at war with the French, of course. And so there was a huge battle. The Seahorse fought off the Legrand, but then had to put back to Portsmouth for repairs, and 30 people had been killed. It was a savage battle. So they had to get new crew. So by the time at the very end of January that they left Portsmouth again, they now no longer had time to get as far as Sumatra because the transit was going to be on the 6th of June of that year, and the transit wasn't going to wait for anybody. And so they only got as far as Cape Town. They would never get to Sumatra. So they went ashore in Cape Town, built an observatory and observed the transit. And the readings they got were the best of anywhere in the world. Then in 1769, of course, there's going to be the second transit, and that's when Cook went to Tahiti and got good recordings. And in 1769, Jeremiah was sent up to the North Cape, and it was cloudy. He got no readings at all on that day. But those were the trips. And then this other surveying trip, the big one, was the 5 years he spent in America, plotting the border between the states of Pennsylvania and Maryland in what is now the Mason-Dixon line in America. So these are local maps. The one you see here just in Upper Teesdale near Raby Castle on the Raby Estates. Here's another one that he did. You see the artistry, you see the colors and things. Jeremiah was a great artist. And here's another one from Redworth, which is a local village, all part of the Raby Estates. And if I come close up, you see the cartouche, the wonderful artistry that Jeremiah was depicting. And you could write the girl on the right milking a cow. You could write a technical article on these. And here's the line map from the Mason-Dixon line. So it was a straight line on the ground that they were required to draw. So the map only needs to be a straight line. And so this is Jeremiah's own map of the Mason-Dixon line as it was defined in law, and he and Charles Mason surveyed it in the 5 years from 1763 to 1768. So this was Jeremiah, again, following the family into surveying, and a great artist and scientist as well. Jeremiah never married and had no children, no legal children. We think actually he had 3 illegitimate children, but the story doesn't go through with them. So we now go back to the children of George, and there is the eldest, and this is the next George Dixon. So this is George 5 on your little trees. And he inherited the mining from his father, George. So he was a coal miner. But actually, we have to say he's not part of our scientific story, and we merely include him. He's a very unfortunate individual member of the family, because where you had the right to mine coal, you had the right to mine and extract the coal from under your own land as laid out on the surface of the ground. And he went down in one of the coal mines, and he went further than the surface of his mine. And the tragedy is that he was stealing coal from his neighbors. They found out about it and they sued him, and he was bankrupted. So he ceases to be part of our story. Meanwhile, his younger brother, John, whom we see here, was a much more moral person. He wasn't part of the family. He had inherited coal mines as well, but there were no problems with him. But he was again a surveyor, and here's the map that he drew of Cockfield Fell. But his main contribution was that his brother, having lived in Garden House that they had inherited, and losing it because of his bankruptcy, John, being the younger brother, went off and built a house in Cockfield, which we will look at in a minute. But he had a huge number of children, of whom this, John Dixon, is one of them. John had 2 wives, 5 children by one and 12 children by the other. So that was a big contribution to the Dixon family tree. Here we see John Dixon, and this is John II, born in 1796, who was a great railway engineer. So we're really getting into the engineering side of the science. He worked closely with George Stephenson in the development of the railways in this area. You'll know that this year is the celebration of 200 years of the Stockton-Darlington Railway carrying passengers, and I'll come to this later on because it becomes relevant. But here we have John Dixon, who organised the crossing of Chat Moss on the Liverpool to Manchester line. He surveyed the Weardale Railway. He was chief engineer on the Stockton-Darlington for a while and was a great engineer. He was a surveyor indeed, and that was how he'd started. And here are some of the maps that he did, both initially for the Raby Estates as a young man, but then later for the railways. And his railway maps were very extensive. This is his younger brother, Robert, who was going to go out to Australia, as several of them did. But before he went, amazingly, that is a drawing he did at the age of 12 of the house that his father had built, the homestead in the middle of Cockfield. And for a 12-year-old, I think that's pretty damn talented. And there you see the house with its frontage and the chimneys. And there's a photograph of the house today in the middle of Cockfield. And it's recognizably the same. It's now 2 properties, but that is the homestead in the middle of Cockfield as built by John Dixon. Robert, meanwhile, who had done the sketch, then went out to Australia with 2 of his brothers, and they settled first in Van Diemen's Land, where they were farmers. And then Robert sold out to his 2 brothers who were there with him, and he became a surveyor in Australia and was one of the greatest surveyors Australia has ever had. It was as they were opening up that country, and he has extensive articles written in the dictionary of the Australian Dictionary of National Biography. I've been sent material by the Australian National Library about him. We've got copies of his maps. And one of the more interesting ones is the map that he did of Moreton Bay, which is up in the Queensland at the mouth of the Brisbane River. So it's where the city of Brisbane now is, and the river debouches into the sea. And all right, he's now living in Australia for the rest of his life. But actually, if you look at the cartouche of the map, he's dedicated it to His Grace the Duke of Cleveland. And the Duke of Cleveland was, of course, Lord Barnard. At this period of time, briefly, the Lords Barnard were promoted and they became first earls, then marquesses, and then dukes. And there were 4 sequential dukes, the father and 3 sons, none of whom had any children, and that title then lost. But he is the Duke of Cleveland, the Lord Barnard of Raby Castle. And here, if you look in the middle of it, and I'll use my cursor just to look, there is Raby Bay, as in Raby, the castle we've been looking at, which he named in Moreton Bay, and that is Cleveland Point for the Duke of Cleveland. So, sorry, I beg your pardon, it jumped. So he was using his memories of Cockfield to name places in Australia. Here we have the next John as well. So this is John III, and he is another engineer born in 1835. And he was an engineer, and with his brothers, he was building bridges and railways, first in this country, but then out in Egypt. And John Dixon was a great engineer. They built bridges across the Nile and they built railways in Egypt. And while he and his younger brother Wayneman, whom you met in that first photograph of the sundial, he and Wayman worked in Egypt, and they were there, and they thought about the project because Queen Victoria had been given the Cleopatra's Needle. But of course, it was 120 tons of granite lying in the sand. And so John and Wayneman devised the project to bring Cleopatra's Needle back to England. And so they did it. It was a huge project. And here are paintings done by John Dixon. So you can see, again, he's a talented artist. And here in the water, you see the caisson that they built round Cleopatra's Needle, which is inside that steel caisson. And here it is leaving Egypt, being towed out to sea. You see it more clearly there. The 120-ton needle is lying inside. They then got it to London, and here it is being erected on the embankment, which is where you can go today and see it. And it was an amazing project. And these watercolors were all done by John Dixon and are now kept in the Museum of London. Another of their brothers was Railton Dixon, and here you see him in all his glory. He was the one who was knighted, indeed. So he is Sir Railton Dixon, but he started a shipyard building in Middlesbrough on the River Tees, and they built over 500 ships over time. He became mayor of Middlesbrough. He was knighted by the king, and they were building huge ships, and he became very wealthy. So at last we're getting some money into the family, because up to now they've had enough, but never a lot. But he was a true engineer with shipbuilding. And here is Wayneman Dixon in the close-up, who was the one who we first saw admiring the sundial. But he was an engineer, he was a surveyor, he drew maps of the Great Pyramid, he discovered chambers inside the Great Pyramid that hadn't been found before, and brought out artifacts which he gave to the British Museum, and they're in the British Museum now. And most relevantly today, as I said earlier, to remind us that it's the 200th anniversary this year, Wayneman Dixon in 1925, on the 100th anniversary, sealed a time capsule of papers on the railways and left it to be opened 100 years later. So in fact, on September the 25th, Jeremy Dixon, who is the current custodian of the time package, is bringing it up to Locomotion Museum in Shildon, and we will have a grand opening. And in fact, I'm organising this, and so far I've got 24 different Dixons, descendants of George Dixon, George IV Dixon, all descendants of him, and they will be coming up to see it. And here is the package, which we will be opening. We don't know what's in it, we just have to wait and see. But that is an excitement that we will be having up here, and anybody's welcome to come to Locomotion Museum on September the 25th. So I hope you all agree that the Dixons are an extraordinary family that went on for generation after generation in a most unusual way. I think perhaps the most extensive genetic following that I have ever heard of. So anyway, thank you very much indeed. So if anybody's got any questions or any comments, I'd be delighted to try and help them. But in the meantime, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Well, that's wonderful, Jonathan. Thank you very much for that entertaining talk. I enjoyed the rehearsal. I've enjoyed it, I have to say, even more, because I've now worked on the family tree, and I now understand much more than I did before. If you want a candidate alternative family to work from, I would try the Darwins. There are still plenty of Darwins alive and well in Cambridge to this day.
Yes, I quite agree. The old man was a doctor, but the Darwins is, yeah.
They go as far back, I have to say, as the 16th, 17th century.
Yeah,
Could I ask a question, please?
please.
Dean Butler here. Is there any chance that any of the Dixons were slide rule designers roughly from 1825 to 1850? I collect slide rules, and there was a Dixon back in those days, and unfortunately I don't have access to it, it's in another building, that has hyperbolic functions on it that were used for calculating the point at which to shut off the valves in a steam engine.
Wow. That's in fact a double wow in view of what we've been talking about, that several of them were building railways and were engineers. I don't know. I've never heard of this. That's a totally new thing. But when you get back to your other building, if you could send me an image and find out anything, because I am now in contact with the people who are experts in the engineering side. And if there are any clues to be had, it's entirely possible. I can't answer the question,
Yeah.
but I don't
I'll have
know.
to get
But
your
it's an
email at
interesting
some
thought.
point.
Yeah, his email is in the bulletin. If you
Oh, okay. I'll find it then.
at the bottom of the page. Yeah.
Just one last thing. What they were trying to do was just like today, save fuel.
Yes.
Yes.
So when you're pushing in a steam engine in the cylinder, there's a point at which you can shut the the inlet valve off, and then you still have enough pressure to operate just fine. You lose a little bit of power, but you save a lot of fuel.
Yeah.
This, sorry, Dean, this is absolutely staggering, because I am aware that John Dixon, I'll have to go back. It's in the Durham County Record Office archives, but I've seen a reference to a note that he wrote about the saving of steam, the saving of fuel in the running of a steam engine. This is, you make me gasp with potential excitement on what you're saying.
This is why we have these meetings. So
Absolutely.
exchange of knowledge.
Dean, do please try and find it and send me any clues you've got and any images you've got, and I'll discuss it with experts here.
Jonathan, I'll do that. Thank you. Fortunately, I have one of those slide rules. They're very rare.
That's terrific. You do know, Dean, that the slide rule was invented by William Oughtred in between inventing the multiplication sign and the
Yes.
double horizontal sundial.
Yes. In fact, I have slide rules that go back that far.
Yes. Of course, they go back even further, but they weren't actually sliding. They were just the rule bit you use the compass with. You don't need the slide bit. That's just a luxury. It makes it easier to use. Anybody else got any questions for Jonathan, or indeed on any other subject?
I have a question.
Yes.
Because there was also some Dixons in Australia who were some of the first pilots, weren't they? And there was a Miss Dixon, I think, who was the first passenger on an aircraft, sort of like the box kites and things. I can't remember exactly, but I know there was somebody Dixon.
I can't follow on that one. I don't know. The Dixons, Robert Dixon, who moved off and became the surveyor, had children, and there are at least 2 different properties which are in the National Register of Interesting Places in Australia, and I'm probably not using the right technical terms. One, both up in Queensland. One because he introduced sugarcane into Australia and had a sugar extraction business, and his house is now a national monument in Queensland. And another who was a tanner and had a large shoe factory in Queensland, both in the Brisbane area. And so the Dixon connections from this family of Dixons are fairly deep in Australian culture and history. But I don't know of them now. I'm not saying no. I mean, it's not that rare a name, Dixon, and it's entirely possible it was some other Dixon in the airline business. I don't know.
That's all tremendous. Thank you very much for that. I enjoy these exchanges.
Yes.
Well, I think
opening of that time capsule will be just before our Newbury meeting. I hope somebody will participate in that event and will report about the contents of the package.
Well, Martins, what you need to do is to visit Newbury on the 27th via locomotion on the 25th, and you can carry the news south.
You know, Jonathan, when you're opening this meeting, or when you're closing the meeting on the 25th, you can say, right, 2 days' time to continue this interest. You can go to Newbury in Berkshire for a mere £10. You can go to
when I have a room of 24 Dixons, but also a huge number of the world's press, because of course the major celebrations, which are taking place actually on the Saturday, the 25th, we're doing the opening is the Thursday, because we can't get any closer to the Saturday, because the world is descending on Shildon and Darlington and Stockton for this. And we have a member, some of you will know the name of Timothy Hackworth, who was building early locomotives, and his granddaughter will be present, or great-granddaughter. I'm not sure how many generations I need. I'm not sure there are any Stevensons, and we're going to have members of the Pease family, because the Peases were great. They, again, Quakers in Darlington, and they funded the early railway. And I gather we're having 7 members of the Pease family present. So I shall be very minor and sitting right at the back, keeping my head down.
Yes, that's all absolutely wonderful. I've looked at the map of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, and it does go through the estate. So there was no grumbling by the relevant lord at the time about having a nasty railway line going past his house, because, well, there it is.
What, when you say this across the Raby estate, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, Frank, that's another 1.5 hour lecture for you.
I thought it would
because
be, yes.
actually the Lord Barnard of the day fought strongly against it.
Oh, he did.
Because it was going to upset his fox hunting in his park.
Yes,
and it was a huge battle to get his permission to put the railway across. And it's actually not the Stockton and Darlington stretch, it's going back the other way from West Auckland, and it's basically to Barnard Castle and then the Transpennine line that he tried to prevent. And he tried to get laws passed in the House of Lords that would prevent it being built. He was very anti.
Well, all the way leaves had to be passed by Acts of Parliament anyway, from then onwards, for the next 150 years of building railways, indeed to this day, which is why HS2's been so difficult to build. Nobody wants a new railway till they decide to take it apart.
Yes, let's not go there. We'll start a political conversation.
I think we are about to wind up. So thank you, everybody, for coming. So Martins, if you can unshare your screen, we can say goodbye to everybody. Thank you very much all for coming. And we hope to see you at the equivalent meeting in October sometime, when we have our September bulletin, which we are busy working on. And articles, I think, are probably still just welcome, but we're putting it together slowly.